remember what it was like to learn guitar tab. And I was like, wow, this is really easy. What a simple and efficient way of writing down music. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, wait, what does that symbol do? Wait, what does that symbol do? I'm Drew, by the way. I'm a guitar teacher, and I'm going to go through all the guitar tab symbols that I can think of. There's a lot of them, so if I forget any, let me know. All the symbols on guitar tab represent a technique on the guitar. So you could probably do an hour-long video on each one. I'm going to try to keep these to short explanations. That way you can use this video as a reference guide. All right, let's get started. We're going to start with the arch, a little curved line. These are hammer-ons and pull-offs. So it's the same symbol either way. It's a little arch over a couple of notes. If the notes are going up, it's a hammer-on. Pluck the first note like normal, then hammer on to the second one with the left-hand finger, hard enough that you hear a note without plucking it. If the notes are going down, it's pull-off. Put fingers on both notes, pluck the first one like normal, and then use the higher left-hand finger to pluck the string as you remove it. If you see more than two notes that have an arch over it, you're supposed to play all of those notes with hammer-ons and pull-offs. Or slides, but we'll get to slides later. Basically, one pluck per arch. If you see an arch that's only one note, you're just supposed to hold that note out longer. Sometimes writers will help you out and put like a little H or a little P over the top of the arch to let you know whether it's a hammer-on or a pull-off, even though you don't need it. Sometimes they even see an H or a P without the arch, and that's the same thing.
So as I edit this video, I'm realizing things that I have forgotten. There's no way I'm going to get everything, but I'm going to try to get some of them. One thing I forgot, I'm not sure if this is a symbol, but it is something a student of mine asked me about the day I recorded this, and that is really little numbers. So numbers that are like a smaller font than the rest of them. Those are grace notes, or notes that are not rhythmically part of the phrase, but are nevertheless heard. So picture like 5-7, where it's a hammer-on, where you go 5-7, and you hear the 5 and you hear the 7. They're both rhythmically separated. Now, if the 5 was a smaller font, like it's a tiny, tiny 5 and a big 7, it'd be like ba-da. The 5 is heard, but just barely. It's heard as one note. Ba-dum. There you go.
Moving on, diagonal lines. Diagonal lines are slides. You pluck the first note and then drag your finger all the way across to the next one while you continue to push on the string. If it has an arch over it, like the hammer-ons and pull-offs, then don't pluck the second one. Just pluck the first note and slide to the second one. We call that a legato slide. If it has no arch, just the diagonal line, then we call that a shift slide, and you would go ahead and pluck the first and the second note too.
It's also diagonal lines that go to nowhere. So picture number, diagonal line, and then nothing. That would just fall off into nothingness. Play the number, slide in that direction, and just let it trail off.
Arrows. Curved arrows are bends. The curve swoops up and has an arrow on the end of it. Bends are when you pluck a string, and while still pressing into the fretboard, you bend the string. Musically speaking, there's no such thing as bending down. Whether you bend a string toward the ground or toward the ceiling, you're still bending the string up in pitch. If you do see a bend that swoops downward, that's a release, meaning that the note has already been bent and you're just releasing it back down. There's also something called a pre-bend. That's a straight vertical upward arrow. That's when you bend the string ahead of time without plucking it. Usually you're doing that because you then want to pluck and release the string. So you don't want to hear the note bending upward, but you want to hear it fall back down. Most often it'll say above the line how far to bend the string. So most commonly you'll see full or half. For a half bend, you want to bend the string until it reaches the note on the next fret. For a full bend, it's 2 frets. You'll also see 1.5 bends, 2 like 2 full step bends. 1.5 would be like 3 frets, 2 would be like 4 frets. There's even quarter bends or less. Quarter bend would be like just a tiny little bend, not even enough to reach a fret higher in pitch.
Quick timeout as I'm editing this video. If you're new to guitar or you just want to get better a lot faster, I teach guitar lessons over Zoom. And I offer a free session to anyone who's interested in guitar lessons. So if you want to sign up for that or you just want more information, you can go to drewdavis.com.
Parentheses. Parentheses usually just mean to let a note ring out. So you might see a number followed by another number in parentheses. Sometimes people use parentheses for other stuff, though, which can kind of be a little confusing. In those cases, I would hope they'd help you out by writing it in plain English below the line. Ghost notes are sometimes written in parentheses. Those are notes that are either barely played or barely perceived. People also use parentheses for optional notes or notes that are played on repeat, all kinds of stuff. But again, in those examples, they'll often write an explanation of what they're using it for. More on parentheses later. Horizontal squiggly lines. This is vibrato. When you see that, you want to gently bend the string back and forth. That makes the pitch go up and down subtly. Sometimes people will even change the way that the squiggly lines look to indicate how intense the vibrato ought to be. So if you see like a little subtle wave, play a little vibrato. If you see an insane jagged line, play with tons of vibrato. I had a piece of sheet music in college one time, and on the top of the page, I swear it said, the vibrato should be so big you could drive a truck through it. Weird. Capital P.M. PM, usually with little dashes after it, is palm muting. The dashes show you how long you should be doing the palm muting for. So you put your right hand on right here where the strings attach to the guitar, and it creates kind of a thuddy sound. TR and squiggly lines. Trills. These are trills. Same squigglies as before, but now the letters TR in front. That's a trill, and that's like rapid fire hammer-ons and pull-offs. You'll usually see one note followed by another note in parentheses with TR squiggles above it. Yet another use of parentheses. X's. X's are percussive notes. If you see an X on tab, that means that you want to hit the string, but you don't want to play any particular pitch. You just want to make a percussive sound. You lightly touch the strings with your left hand to muffle the sound, and then when you hit the strings, it just goes click. Sometimes you can do this with one hand. You muffle it with your palm and then hit it with a pick. An X could mean other percussive things too, like knocking on the body of the guitar or smacking strings upward, downward kind of thing. But that's another example of when you'd like to see some sort of clarification written in plain English. Here's a little extra advice on this, actually. I very often see 2, 3, or 4 strings X'd out when I personally know that the player is hitting all 6 strings. So if you see the same, you might try muting the whole guitar and just seeing how it sounds. Vertical squiggly lines. So we had the horizontal squiggly lines, and now we have vertical squiggly lines. This is when you play a chord slow enough that you hear the individual notes, but not so slow as to sound like they're rhythmically separate plucks. Sometimes you'll see the word arpeggiate written. Capital T. Tapping. Capital T above a note. It's usually a hammer-on with your right hand. Most often followed by a pull-off, also with your right hand. Diamonds and angle brackets. These are harmonics. You do not fully press a string for this. You just barely touch the string above the fret, pluck the string, and then remove your hand. You don't need to do it fast. The kinds of harmonics that are the most common are called natural harmonics. And generally, they're played on frets 5, 7, and 12, the most commonly. I should say. There are other less common harmonics, and they will usually have capital A dot H dot for artificial harmonics. And then there are pinch harmonics, which are popular in heavier music. They'll have PH written above them.
There's also semi-harmonics where SH is written and you mostly hear the note, but you kind of hear the harmonic.
Honestly, harmonics are like a big can of worms and they take a while to fully explain. I might dive into that in another video. Diagonal lines below or above the notes. This is tremolo picking. That's where you pluck a single string back and forth very, very rapidly. I suppose you could do it with multiple strings, but usually it's one string. And you pluck so fast that it doesn't even sound like rhythmically separated at all. It just kind of sounds like. But rhythmically speaking, each slash makes it twice as fast. Diagonal lines in between notes. Sometimes they're because it's diagonally down and then back up between the notes, it can kind of like look like the letter V. Either way, these are whammy bar cymbals. So you would pluck the note, pull down the whammy bar, and then return it back to normal. All right, that's all I can think of right now. One thing I didn't cover here is rhythmic notations. Sometimes like on the top of notes, writers will superimpose rhythmic notation on top of tab.
Although now that I think of it, they superimpose a lot of symbols that come from notation over the top of tab. But that would crowd up my list pretty quick.
I wouldn't consider that necessarily part of tab symbols, but I should definitely mention it. I don't really see any shortcut to learning how to read those other than learning to read notation, which is the traditional way of reading and writing down music. Perhaps another video for another day.